Vernomatic Productions.
Are you ready?
Live from the Metal Mayhem Studios in Rochester, New York.
We are gold.
And heard around the world by metalheads just like you. This is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Heavy metal music.
Your weekly dose of metal music, interviews, album reviews, news, and more. Want to be part of the show? Send us a message through our website, metalmayhemroc.com, or hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. Search Metal Mayhem ROC, a proud member of the Pantheon podcast team.
It's getting nice and heavy.
Now, welcome our hosts, John the Vernomatic Verno, and direct from New Jersey, Metal Walt.
Good evening, everybody. As always, Thursday night's new content drops. Tonight's episode, we're here to talk with vocalist Jeff Allen of Witchslayer, the heavy metal band from Chicago, who in 2023 properly released its first ever album, something that was in the works for over 40 years. Jeff joins Metal Walt and myself to talk about the history of the band, the new release, and the continued plans for 2023. Walt actually caught the band live in concert in Chicago about a month ago at the Legions of Metal 2-day concert. There was the event where Metal Church played the first show with Mark Lopes. The Rods were there. Witchslayer played. And there was like a whole lineup of bands. It really is a cool story, man. You know, he tells a story about how Witchslayer was there at the same time of Metallica's demo. They were there when Slayer was coming out, Anvil, early Maiden. I mean, they were right there. He shares this cool story where he had the opportunity to submit a demo tape to Hetfield, James Hetfield of Metallica, when Metallica was looking for a vocalist. Let's see, he tells stories about what happened when Witchslayer opened up for Accept, and Wolf Hoffman exactly wasn't the most courteous tour mate. And just stories about going to California and seeing Metal Day at the US Festival. It really is a fun story, so stick around for that. That's coming up in just a second. If you're new to the Metal Mayhem ROC show by finding us on the Pantheon Music Podcast Network, welcome, and we invite you to get up to our website, metalmayhemroc.com, and sign up for our weekly newsletter. This is the chance for us to stay in touch with you, give you alerts about new podcast episodes, new YouTube interviews that we do. There's a lot of them dropping like every couple days. We have something new up there. Monday nights, we have a live radio show on Metal Devastation Radio. So that's your one-stop shopping. That's metalmayhemroc.com. You can also find past episodes. Let's see, last week we had the Hell's Disciple reunion show with Satan, Night Demon, and Haunt. Don Jameson, a couple weeks ago, the heavy metal comedian, he was on talking about the state of bands in 2023. And Brian Diamond of MTV, he was a content producer. He was on talking about cool stories from MTV back in the day. And we started the summer off with Bobby Blitz from Overkill, was here talking about the new album Scorched, the tour that just started. So he was talking about that. So there's a lot of good content up there. Again, that's metalmayhemroc.com. All right, so let's get into this. For Metal Walt, I'm the Vernomatic. This is Metal Mayhem ROC. Good morning, everybody. As we tape this, it's a balmy Saturday morning in July. Metal Walt and I are having our morning coffee, and we're here to talk with Jeff Allen of the band Witchslayer. They're from Chicago. They have a long, rich history. We're here to find out the story and find out what they're doing in 2023. But first, Metal Walt, how you doing, my friend?
Good morning, Verno. I'm great, man. I got my coffee. I got my Cubs hat. And hopefully Jeff's a Cubs fan. We'll see what happens. Well,
let's get Jeff Allen from Witchslayer. Jeff, welcome to Metal Mayhem ROC. How are you, my friend?
Right on. Good.
Hey, Jeff, good morning. Good to see you again, man. It's been about a month, and that was a killer night, and I can't wait to talk a little bit about it a little bit later. So, listen, John and I we've had a couple of like feel good stories of the year so far in our shows, right? And I think you complete the trifecta. Maybe there'll be more to come, but I think you complete the trifecta of, let's say, bands that like unique stories or unsung heroes. We had a Norwegian band called Wigwam early in the year. They kind of lightning struck twice with success. And then we had the 80s band Heaven's Edge on recently, and they put their first album out in 25 years because the label came to them instead of writing an album. And I think for you, it's just the same. You know, you're a band that, you know, really cut your teeth in the early 80s, and then you went away for a long time and you brought it back. So it's just a fascinating story, and we want to hear all about it. So congratulations on the album. I have a question to ask you as we open, okay? The original logo, that logo goes back to the 80s, correct? Like, who designed the logo?
That goes back to when it goes back to early 80s, and it was the drummer's brother, Don Clark. And he was at that show in Chicago. But Don was an artist, and he drew that logo. We just went with it. It sort of worked. And when I brought the band back, I thought that was a nice statement to put that on the cover. Nice shout out to the 80s metal scene.
Oh, it's totally killer. I was imagining my teenage boys, they play roller hockey in an organized league. And I said, how great would this be? This would be the perfect logo to put on a nice black jersey. And he named the team Witchslayer. And then I figured there's about 10 or 11 kids on the team. I coach it. We'll take each of the songs and there'll be the names on the back. What do you think, Jeff? You up for that?
I'm down for that. I think it'd be great.
Well, if it happens, definitely you'll get the honorary captain's jersey if we get you one. But anyway, we want to just say hi and welcome you. So welcome to Metal Mayhem ROC. How are you today?
Good. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Jeff, we want to go back to the beginning of the story, let's say. John and I have we've really read up on the story of Witchslayer and how it all started. And of course, the most important thing is the present, right? And we're going to get to that later. We want to talk about the new album and all the songs and really get into it. But I think it's important now for you to talk about the origins of the band. So tell us when it formed, who was in there, and that period of time for you.
Well, we all grew up in the Chicago suburbs, the Northwest Chicago suburbs. And there was a bunch of us that went. There was a couple high schools. There was a high school called Forest View, and our rivals were Elk Grove High School. And funny is James Eha, the guitarist from the Smashing Pumpkins, went to Elk Grove High School. And then there was Prospect High School, another one in our area. And the guys from Warcry, outside of Paul Speckman, went to Prospect High School. And then I went to Forest View. Speckman went to Forest View. The guys from Rust went to Forest View. So we were all these rock guys in the same area. And one night there was a party. There was some people were selling their house, right? And one of the kids threw this massive house party in this empty house. And I had been in a garage. I was like 19 at the time. And I'd been in a really bad garage band, but I was getting my feet wet as a lead singer. And so I go to this party. Everybody I knew that was in bands was at this party, and there was an open mic in the basement. So I ended up gravitating towards the basement where the band was. And I knew Speckman, he was on bass, and there was a couple other guys I knew, and they're like, "Come on, Alan, get in there and sing. We know you can sing." So I was like, there was a kegger going on, and I had a couple of beers. I was like, sure, I'll jump in there. And we just started rattling off, doing like some Sabbath tunes, some Priest tunes, just having a good time. And once we were done, these two guys approached me. This one guy, Craig McMahon, and this other guy, Tom McNeely. And they had, the biker jackets, and they had all these guitar pins on their lapels, and the whole 80s metal look. And they're like, "Man, you're a good singer. We need a singer. We're forming a new band. And what kind of music are you into?" And I was a couple years older than these guys. They were probably 17. And I was like, "Oh, I'm into the 70s music. I like Van Halen. And I like, AC/DC and stuff. They're like, well, we're going all new wave of British heavy metal. You gotta get into those bands. You gotta start learning those songs. You ever hear of Angel Witch? I'm like, no. And then they're like, why don't you? We rehearse in this guy's basement. Why don't you show up and next Wednesday or whatever, and we'll go through a couple songs and we'll see if you like it or not. So I show up and we did Paranoid and then we're in this guy's basement, Ken Wentling, the drummer, and it's like all the lights are dark and they got their girlfriends there sitting down in front of us watching us. And so we did a couple songs. I'm like, yeah, these guys are pretty cool. I think this would be fun to do. It's better than the band that I was in. So I gave it a shot, and that was the birth of Witchslayer.
So when you guys cut the demo, I mean, it's dated 1983.
Yeah.
Like, how old were you guys?
When the band formed in 1980, I was 19 years old. So, and then we went through a few versions of the band. Originally, we had 5 guys, and this guy, Tom McNeely and Craig McMahon, and they were getting along. And then we tried a couple other guitarists over time. And so I went with Craig. I thought Craig was the smarter of the bunch. It was me, myself, Sean McAllister, who I was friends with. He lived on my block. It really was Craig and I who just went off and reformed Witchslayer the way we wanted to see it. So it was initially Sean, Craig, myself, and then the Dale Clark, who we found in an entertainer ad. And we brought Dale in. At some point, we decided we needed a demo tape because back then, you're at the mercy of the record labels, and you had to shop a demo tape to get a deal to record an album. We had a couple songs we wrote with the original band. One was I Don't Want to Die. The other was Witchslayer. And between Craig, myself, Dale, and Sean, we had written a whole set that we could perform live. So Craig had met this guy from the studio called Streeterville, which was a pro studio in the city. And we got this guy, Steve Casile, who was an engineer, pro engineer. And he decided he'd take us under his wing and help us put a demo together. And he had a home studio out in the suburbs. And so we showed up at his house, and over the course of a weekend, we put together that 5-track demo. And we used that to get on Metal Massacre 4. Yep. We had gone out to Los Angeles and just called Brian Slagle and said, hey, man, we're Witchslayer. We're from Chicago. We want on your next Metal Massacre compilation. That's how that started. But we used the demo as a tool to do that.
I picked up on something that I wanted to show you. And this is why I knew it was destined for you and I to speak, because this was up on your Facebook page. This was probably one of those college fanzines or whatever where they used to play metal. I went to this college and graduated from there. Talk about irony. Yeah, I graduated there in 1993, Montclair State College. It's about 20 minutes up the road, and I came in a little bit later. I started school there in 89, and when I was there was no metal station. I mean, we have a metal station out of Seton Hall University, you may have heard of, called WSOU. It was one of the biggest ones back in the day, but still pretty cool. But I think what's awesome here, and John and I looked at this, is look at the company you're in on this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Maiden, Merciful Fate, Queensryche, Raven. I mean, a lot of these bands we've had on our show. It's really, really kind of cool.
What gets me is Metallica. You know, they had a demo. We had a demo. We were even at that point in time. You know, I just, it kills me when I see that. But yeah, a lot of it's Maiden, Merciful Fate. You know, I thought we were heading in the right direction when I saw that.
Yeah.
Now, Chicago, you know, the main radio stations would not touch metal. They just wouldn't touch metal. And when Metallica really started to take off, I saw Metallica in Chicago at a bar. And I actually, funny story is, you know, there was these groupies in Chicago, and I think one of them was hooking up with Cliff Burton. And she had all their phone numbers, all of Metallica's phone numbers back then, because they were all kids. And there was a time when they were tossed around bringing in a lead singer. because Hetfield really wasn't comfortable being a lead singer. He just wanted to play guitar. So this gal, I'm not going to mention names, but she's like, you should go try out for Metallica. And I was like, no, I don't think that's going to work. I don't think I'm a fit. I don't think our sound is right. They're San Francisco, I'm Chicago. They're really heavy, really aggressive. I just think we're going down different paths. She's like, so what? Just call them anyways and try it. So I called James Hetfield from my parents' house one day, and he's like, who is this? So I goes, oh, I'm Jeff Allen, a band called Witchslayer Chicago, and such gave me your number. He's like, oh. He goes, well, we're going to be in Chicago. Give me your tape when we're there. We're going to play this club. And they were touring for Kill 'Em All. And so the day of the show comes, I had my tape, and then I just backed out. I didn't give it to them. I was like, they're too heavy. The radio's never going to play their music. They're just, they're just way too ahead of their time. And I remember being in that club. There was like 50 of us, and Metallica comes off their tour bus, just walks in and with the look of, they wanted to kill everybody in the bar. And they just fucking destroyed the place, man. But, to see their success today is stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
Now, on the Cliff 'Em All videotape back in the day, they had that famous Chicago clip where people from the crowd pulled Kirk's guitar into the crowd.
I was at that.
Rumor has it was you and Dave Clark were the ones that pulled the guitar into the crowd.
Yeah, I was right there. I was a few people away from that. That was an insane show. That was with Raven. They opened for Raven. They were on Johnny Z's Megaforce label. Yep. Doing a tour with Raven.
Hey, before I let Walt get back, I just have one question. You mentioned Chicago, and through show research, you have a history, your family being involved with the studio or the union of roadies. Did you have a chance to see that very first Van Halen show at the Aragon Ballroom, March 78?
Yeah. They used to call that the Aragon Ballroom. I was at that show. They were opening for Ronnie Montrose, who was solo. He had put out the Gamma album.
Yep.
And Journey. They were opening for Journey. And Van Halen was an unknown band at the time. They had that Kinks cover on the radio, and that was taken off. And I had no idea who the hell Van Halen was. And I heard that they had to set up their own stage. They had to carry their own shit in and set up the stage. And that band came on, and I saw Eddie Van Halen, like a young Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth, and they were just killing it. And I was like, who are these guys? That guitar player kicks ass, and that singer's great. And then the last song was Girl, You Really Got Me Going. I'm like, oh, that's that band that's on the radio. And then after that, Van Halen just exploded. Well, but I was at the right age at the right time to see all these bands in their prime.
It's awesome. Well, VH1 came out a week earlier, late February 78. It was released, and this show was early March. So
great show. I was probably a junior, senior in high school when I saw that.
Hey, we Jeff, this is an important part of your history, and we don't want to gloss over it. But as you said here, this is what prompted the demo, the 5-song demo you get on to Metal Blade, which is awesome. And I was just looking at that little college clip, and it's funny that you were above what looks to be Metal Massacre 3. So it must have been your demo was out, it got picked up, and here you are on this one. But again, some good company on here too. I mean, you have your Chicago mates Trouble on this one, and of course Lizzie Borden here. So talk about this time. I mean, was the intention after this maybe experience, was this when you guys were going to maybe expect to go out and do a whole full LP? Was that the path planned?
So we were sort of open. I mean, we were a bunch of kids just fumbling through this. We didn't have a manager, but we knew Brian Slager was doing Metal Massacre. We knew Metallica was on the first one. We went out to the US Festival in '83 to see the Metal Day, and that was our first time out in LA. And like I said, we just cold called Brian Slager and handed him our demo to get on Metal Massacre. And we didn't know what to expect from that. He's like, and he's just like, give me a master of whatever song you want, and we'll include it. And then at the time we were talking to him, he's like, I've heard about Chicago. It's got an upcoming scene. There's a bunch of bands there. I was thinking of dedicating Metal Massacre 4 to the Chicago scene. He put 5 bands on there. But I didn't know what would come out of this. And Craig and I were talking. We're like, well, let's give this guy our shittiest song. We don't know, we're going to lose rights to this song. And we don't know what's going to come out of this. So let's, and which was a mistake. We should have given him our most killer song. But we gave him I Don't Want to Die, which turned out to be one of our hits. It seems like people like that song. And especially when we play now, like we played in Germany, we played I Don't Want to Die. The crowd just, fists went up. Everybody was like, they knew that song. So,
well, that song's got a little bit of it's different from the rest of the material, a little bit of a punk feel to it, a little bit melodic there. So I could see and it has that the riff and the vocal kind of mimic each other. So I could see that being a catchy one. I think it was a good choice.
I didn't like it early on, but it's grown on me over the years. I like it now. And I think when we did this with this latest version of Witchslayer, we modernized it up a little bit, made it a little more heavier.
So Jeff, just an observation of something you just said in there. So you attended the Metal Day at the 83 US Festival?
I did.
Wow, yeah. That's awesome. We had Gil Moore on about a month ago. We interviewed him specifically for their re-release, an LP that they're putting out, or they put out now. And that was a great conversation too. And he told some amazing stories about that day and that kind of thing. Amazing story. Maybe you wouldn't even have known. Tyrant flew in from, what was it, Florida?
Tampa.
They played a show in Tampa the night before with ZZ Top, flew across country without his drums, played the show, and him and Rick Emmett left after the Triumph set, never saw Van Halen, and got in a plane, and were back in Toronto by the next night.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Triumph did a great set that day in California. On our Facebook page, there's a picture somewhere of Mick Mars and myself and Craig. And that was the night before the US Festival. And it was 3 a.m. outside the Troubadour and on the Sunset Strip. And we've all had a few beers at the time, but that's cool. Out there. You can run across that.
Hey, Jeff, how close, where were you in that crowd? How close did you get to the front? And was it really 200 degrees?
It was hot. Yeah, I was up front, maybe 10 people from the stage. We were there all day long. I mean, the opening band was Quiet Riot and then Motley Crue. And we were big Crue fans back then. We wanted to see them. This was like their first big show. And then Ozzy and Priest. We weren't going to miss all this,
Yeah.
So we were out there. Warcry was with us. And we just sat there all day up front. It was hot. For like a week, I was blowing dirt out of my nose, and all this dust in the air. But it was a great day. And, I'm a big music fan. And the day before would have been a good show to see as well. It wasn't metal, but David Bowie played and U2 and a bunch of really In Excess, a bunch of great new wave bands would have been cool to see as well.
A couple of weeks ago, we had Brian Diamond. He was a content producer from MTV on the show, and he was all involved with that. Him and Mark Goodman doing the MTV stuff. But he was mentioning that day before show. And believe it or not, David Bowie awarded one interview before the show, and they had one question. And Brian and Mark Goodman had that question, and they were talking about, I don't recall what the question was, but it was a two-parter. That Brian was very excited that they finagled a two-part question and out of one question. But he was talking about that in that David Bowie was added after everything was booked. The organizer, Wozniak, said, let's get David Bowie. And they had to offer him $1 million plus another $500,000 to fly his whole crew in, which resulted in Van Halen getting another but million, $500,000. So
that's what Van Halen got. They got $1 million just to play that gig in 1983.
I've heard speculation. I'm a big Van Halen fan, and they're all hammered, and I've seen them do better. The Scorpions. What was your assessment of the Scorpions versus everyone else on that show?
I thought they kicked ass. I've seen the Scorpions a handful of times, and every time I've seen the Scorpions, they have delivered.
Yeah.
Now, I saw them on the in Chicago. There used to be this thing called Chicago Fest years ago, and I was in high school, and I went to see Chicago Fest, and they had, I don't know if you've ever been to like Summerfest in Milwaukee, but they have multiple bands playing at the same time. And you go, and it's on a pier in Chicago, and you go up and down the pier. And at the time, like on one stage, Cheap Trick was playing. On another stage, Muddy Waters was playing. And then on another stage, the Scorpions were playing all simultaneously at the same time. And I went and saw the Scorpions. I didn't know who they were, but they had that album with the bubble gum on it. Guys grabbing her boob and the bubble gum's on his hand. I think
Love Drive.
Love Drive, yeah.
Love Drive.
They were supporting the Love Drive album, and they played the entire album, and they destroyed the place. There was maybe 500 people there watching it, but it was like, this band is awesome. And after that, the Scorpions took off, and I saw them a couple more times, but every time they just destroyed. They came out and they just played, they delivered, and they did that in California at the US Festival.
Was Michael Schenker with them when you saw that?
No, and it might have been his brother Rudolph Schenker, but no, that was after Michael Schenker. Schenker didn't last with them too long.
I know he was all over Love Drive. I just wasn't sure if he toured with them, or is that when Matthias started touring with them? So
I never saw Schenker with the Scorpions.
Walt saw Schenker last winter.
Back in last autumn. He waved to me from his Cadillac Escalade as he was driving past and didn't roll down the window to even take a picture. But
I've seen him solo. I would have liked to have seen him in the UFO days. I thought that was the time. But
I never actually saw Michael Schenker solo. I think I saw him with Macaulay Schenker back in the 80s on one of those tours. And I've seen the Scorpions many times, going all the way back to the Blackout era. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Metal Walt's going to get down to the bottom of what exactly happened to Witchslayer for them to disband back in 80s. You're listening to Metal Mayhem ROC with Jeff Allen of Witchslayer. We'll be right back.
Metal Mayhem ROC.
So, Jeff, we definitely want to get into the tracks, but finish out the story. Like, what happened? It seemed like everything was going in the right direction, and I'm assuming you were hitting up the clubs after the demo and the Metal Massacre thing. Like, what went wrong, and then what happened from there?
Well, a bunch of things. For one, when Sean left, we had to find another bassist. We had this big gaping hole in our band. And so we went back to the Illinois Entertainer, and we found Rick Manson. And Rick was from the South Side. We were all Northsiders. And Rick was a little more aggressive with his music taste. He was into the hardcore thrash punk. He liked Suicidal Tendencies, that kind of stuff. We were more into, the British heavy metal, Tigers of Pantang, Saxon, Anguish, that kind of stuff. And so Rick brought a real scary element to the band, real intense, heavy influence. And Rick was also going through hard times, He, for a while, he was living in our recordings or our practice studio. He just wasn't a happy guy at the time. Great guy. I tried to include him as well on the new album, but, so we've had that. And then, the drummer, he'd have his girlfriend there every time, and she'd be getting in the way of all our shit. She'd be walking around fiddling with the drums kit while we're rehearsing and unplugging shit accidentally and all that kind of stuff. And, and then we were were getting to that point, we were like getting into college age. We were 21, 22, and we had to make some decisions, Are we going to go down this path or what? And I just think we had been together 4 years, and I think we were just getting on each other's nerves. Being in a band's like being in a marriage, and you're living with each other. You're basically tied to the hip, and your livelihood's tied to each other. And I just think things, we just weren't getting the breaks. The labels were telling us we were too heavy for prime time. We almost got a deal with Johnny Z, and that fell through. When we're getting radio airplay, we were starting to, we were building a following, no doubt. When we did a show, it would be packed. When the last straw was we were supposed to open for Accept on the Balls to the Wall tour at the Chicago Metro. And their roadies came out right when we arrived and said, get the fuck out of here. We don't want an opening act, And there was nothing we could do about it. They said, here's the money, now get the fuck out of here. And we're like, if this is how the business is, we really want no part of this. And what we should have done is just told them to go fuck. I mean, they were a bunch of older guys. We were in our early 20s. These guys must have been in their 30s. Like 5 groupies come out and just surround us and say, you're not playing. And we were haggling it out with them. And they're like, if you get on stage, you have to set up your own shit. We'll give you one speaker and one light, and that's all you're getting. And in hindsight, we should have said fine and just taken it and gone up on stage, because the place, there must have been 2,000-3,000 people in that place, and a lot of them were there to see us. And when that happened, that was sort of the last straw. It sort of killed the band. And I think we just all needed a break at that point.
Was there a scene, like, you hear so much in Chicago about the North Side, the South Side, like, was there actually like a scene in one section or the other? Like, what was it like?
Well, there are a lot of South Side bands that didn't mix with the North Side bands. Snow White was one of them. Tyrant's Reign. The drummer we pulled for the Gabriel Anthony, he was part of that South Side scene. And the South Side was, an hour from where I lived. I never went to the South Side unless you knew it. It wasn't the best place to go.
Right.
And there was a bunch of us in the North Side, and I just that was our scene. We just sort of stuck to it. But there was definitely a bunch of South Side bands. E-Trope was a city band. Trouble was a city band. We eventually became a city band because we moved our rehearsal space into the city, and that changed venues, people we met, which was good. But yeah, North South Side, definitely 2 different scenes.
So talk about, Jeff, I mean, the most important thing now is bringing us up to the present. So, thank you and appreciate the really killer in-depth backstory. But, what goes on for the last 35 years? Like, obviously you have another career. Did you guys, did you reach out to the original members and say, hey, I want to do this thing again? And how did the whole thing transpire? Multiple times.
When we broke, and another reason why we broke up is 2 of the guys wanted to move to California because it seemed like the scene was in California for bands. That was the industry. I had no desire to move to California at the time. I got into tech. I got into an IT career. It was, the beginning of that whole industry, and I had a knack for that kind of shit. So I went down that path. And that was one of the problems. I had a backup plan. I was able to get into college and get a career and make a living. And it seems like the bands who are really mega successful had no plan B. It was become a successful metal band or nothing. So anyways, 2 guys went to LA or California. It didn't work out. Eventually time went on. I kept in track with all these guys. I knew where they were all at. And early 2000, I decided I wanted to get this album going. I was like, guys, we put together a bunch of songs, enough for an album and a half that are great songs. We should be putting this shit out there just for the sake of documenting it. why leave that stuff on the table? Why never record that stuff? These are good songs. And we worked our asses off to create them. So, a couple of guys would be interested, and I'd rally the other guys and get them together. I had Zoom meetings one time, and, I thought we were all going to pull it together. And then, we're getting ready to start recording, and one guy just drops off, never hear from him, bails on me. And then another problem was Craig got into filmmaking. He's always been a creative guy. He's always had a wife who supported him, lets him do his shit. And so he got into filmmaking in the about 20 years ago. So he, the only reason he was interested in a revival was so he could make a documentary out of it. But then he backed out of it. So that fell apart. And at the time I was living down in Tampa, and Dale Clark, the drummer, was living down there as well. And I tried to, this is maybe about 2010. And I tried to get Dale to start working with him to put the album together. And I had a buddy in Tampa who was from New York, who was a guitar player and a really good guitarist. And I was trying to pull him in. And then he started trying to rearrange or rewrite all the songs. I was like, this isn't going to work. And so eventually I decided that I have to do this in Chicago. I have to use Chicago musicians, or else it's never going to sound the same. Yeah. And if I'm going to bring back the band and I'm going to record an album, it's going to be put under so much scrutiny. You better do it right. And you better not do a half-assed job of it, or else it's going to be a disaster. It's going to trash the name.
So, Jeff, all of the musicians that are visually here on the back and that played at the Reggie shows, they're all Chicago-based musicians then, correct?
Every one of them. I'm the only one that doesn't physically live in Chicago anymore, but everybody is from Chicago. And I consider myself a native Chicago. And I spent 35 years of my life there. There's this distinct sound that came out of Chicago. It's a doomy, gloomy, real heavy, Sabbathy sound. And, unless you grew up and were part of that scene, you're just not going to get it, as far as a musician goes. So I knew I had to do it in Chicago. So I had been in touch with Ken Mandat, who was the guitarist from Damien Thorne. And Ken, back in the day, I remember we were rehearsing in our studio, the one that we share with Trouble. And Mandat walks in out of the blue. It was like on a Friday, Saturday night. We were just jamming out. And here's this little guy. I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? And it turns out it was Ken Mandat from Damien Thorne. And so we became friends and just stayed in touch on Facebook. And one day I was talking to Ken and telling him all the challenges I was having trying to reunite this band and put out this album. And he's like, well, fuck it. Just why don't you and I do it? We'll just do it. We'll do it right. Get it done. And Ken was on the same page as me. So that's when this revival started.
That's amazing that you carried the spirit of the original band members and you didn't stray too far from home, and you kept in musicians, some of them which were still back in the scene back then, that maybe you rubbed elbows with or you're friends with, or at least they were familiar with you. So that's the sweet spot of the whole story, man. I just think it's totally killer. Vern, what was your impression of the album here?
Right off the bat, two songs that I labeled very Chicago doomy-ish, Crypt and Vixen. And another song that I wanted to probably one of my favorites, and I'm probably butchering the title, Augury. Opening riff is just downright evil. So comment on those three songs.
Yeah, I know. Those were Craig McMahon riffs that he put together, and Craig is a little out there, let's put it this way. Today, Craig is running a psychic YouTube channel where he talks to the dead.
All right, what's up?
So he's out there, and he always had a demented view of life. Some really crazy shit has happened to that guy. But he just had a state of mind that was great for writing really evil, wicked songs, and
this was a pleasure to listen to this. I listened to it like 3 or 4 times. And as I'm driving around listening to it, this is my interpretation. Some bands that I hear Witchfinder General in a lot of these songs. I definitely hear Angel Witch, Kevin Hayborn's vocals. It just brings me back to there. I hear some Anvil. I don't know if you're a fan. Yeah, like the comparison to Rob Reiner and Lips. What song did I have that on there? Anvil, Salem Trials, killer riff. The drums sound like Rob Reiner.
One could say that Anvil is the ones who started thrash metal with that sound. A lot of people will say Metallica stole their sound from Anvil. And, you know, a lot of the early metal, you know, I don't remember thrash metal till some of these, like, and Anvil came around. And that real speedy guitar riff that Lips would put out.
We're talking about that. My notes for the song Seduction. Heavy, not thrash, but downright heavy.
You think it's, I would think if any song's thrash, it's the chorus of Seduction, because we speed it up. You know, it's a little dewy, but then we kick into that chorus, and it's just, you know,
that's my notes. I have it on there. I said if there's one song that there's going to be a mosh pit happening for, it's that one.
Yeah, it's that one.
The title track, definitely an opening song. Yeah. Great, get right in there, slows down in the middle, and then the jamming guitar is just priceless.
I love the style that, you know, that was something from back then as well. It was like you had the name of the band, and then the lead track was also the same name. So it's
great point, Walt. Great point.
We did that because Angel Witch had Angel Witch, and we were big Angel Witch fans. So we're like, oh, we got to write. That was our first song we ever wrote. You know, the guitar players were 16, 17. I was probably 19. And I remember Tom McNeely comes in and he's like, what do you guys think of this riff? Wank, you know? And we're like, yeah, cool riff. And we just built a song around it. And we just said, let's just call it Witchslayer. It'll be our Angel Witch. And we've kept it ever since.
Yeah, it really is. I've been spinning. It's funny, Jeff. I have to be honest. I had never really heard of you guys until I knew I was coming out for that work trip to Chicago. I said, let me see who was on the bill. And I liked the logo on the Reggie sign, to be honest. And I'm like, let me see this. And I read the backstory. I bought the CD, and I've been spinning that thing constantly. My 9-year-old daughter, she's like, oh, come on, Dad, another one of this. Like she mixes up Slayer and Witchslayer, but slay is a cool word, and the 9-year-olds, they love that word. So she's like, oh, tell the other guy tomorrow, slay. And I'm like, okay, I'll make sure I do a shout out. But it's a killer album, man. I mean, even like a song like Hang 'em High, it's got that catchy chorus, and it just sticks with you. I keep repeating it in my head all day long.
And we've always wanted to write catchy hooks, catchy lyrics. We didn't want to be some of these bands. It's just, you know, balls out jamming 120 miles an hour. We wanted people to be able to walk away and be able to remember the chorus. Yeah. And if they listen to the album for a while and they come see us, when those choruses hit, their fists are going up in the air because they know the frickin' chorus. Yeah. You know, they know what's coming. And it's an art to writing music. That's the challenge. And, you know, the guys want to write a second album now, follow-up. And I'm like, well, if we're doing this, you know, you guys, you gotta think hooks. You gotta think catchy lyrics. You know, I'll work on the lyrics, but you guys, from the guitar standpoint, you gotta think of a hook. You know, it's got to be memorable.
And Jeff, I just want to reiterate, when I say I hear a certain band in these songs, it's a compliment. Back then, it was hard to hear other bands. You know, there's no radio unless you had the album, and you know, you were kids. I don't know what kind of money you had, so it was.
I didn't have any money.
Yeah, so it wasn't like you had all these bands at your fingertips like it is now. It was just. No. It was a pleasure to listen to. It brought back a lot of memories, and I'll definitely keep it in my rotation. It may be my.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. That's what I meant to compare, because I love all those bands.
Back then, Alyssa used to hang out in the record stores, and a lot of stuff we listened to were imports. Yep. So we had to go to particular record stores that had imports, but you couldn't listen to them. you had to buy them and bring them home, man. You know, it's just you could only buy so many. It was usually word of mouth. I got into Accept because Trouble brought in the album that the Flying V's Are on Fire, Restless and Wild, everything is gone. And that's how I heard Accept. I never knew who Accept was. It's because Trouble brought it in. We listened to it, you know. And so,
Jeff, I had a couple like questions because I want to talk a little bit about the Reggie show as well.
Sure.
But the album, did you guys? Number one was for the 11 songs that are on the album. Is that it? Is that all the songs that you guys had in the can?
No.
Or are there others? And did you actually stay 100% true to the demo, the music, the lyrics, and everything, or did you kind of make some updates to the songs?
Only from a guitar aspect. You know, when we made this album, we had the demo. We had 2 live bootlegs that were really rough, and I had to get Gabriel Anthony in the mix to track them, to create digital tracking. So, and he did it true to form off the songs. He didn't stray from it. The lyrics are the lyrics. They're exact lyrics we wrote back in the day. The guitar, the lead, I had to give Ken Mandat some leeway, some artistic leeway. I just can't say, you can't tell a musician to play somebody else's music exactly verbatim. So I gave Ken a little leeway there, and he kept it pretty much true to form, but when it came to leads, he pretty much did his own thing. But the music is pretty much as is. That, you know, there are a couple other songs we excluded from the 80s, and there's a handful we wrote after we broke up. Craig and I got together. At one point, we wrote 5 songs, which, you know, there's some good songs there. So we still have about another half an album that we could produce, but it would take also writing from this new band, which I'm willing to do, but I want to make sure if we do that we keep it true to form to Witchslayer, which is going to be a challenge, but I'm open to it.
I was going to be one of my questions because I think the album is just good enough. And listen, I was at that show in the crowd, and I'm curious to hear your impressions of the Reggie show. But I'm not going to lie, man. You guys went on at 7:00. That room was packed. The energy was slamming, and I don't know if it was a local thing, but you guys owe it to yourselves to play more shows and make some more music, man, because you guys kicked ass.
Well, you know, this guy, Bob Byrne, who's the promoter of the Legions Festival, this is like the 5th year he's done this. And you know, when he heard we were recording, you know, right off the bat, he's like, hey, you want to do my festival? And I'm like, we're not ready. And then we were targeting the Keep It True Fest in Germany as the festival we wanted to play. And when we finally were ready to do that, he's like, you know, why don't you guys play my next festival then? If you're going to do Keep It True. We said, sure. I said, but I told him, I go, we're doing your festival. I want a prime slot, and I want to be one of the headliners. I don't want to be just, you know, a support act for some other local Chicago bands. I said, we put a lot of work into this. And so he's like, no problem, you got it. And at one point, I thought we were going to open for Metal Church, and Legions of Doom came in and pushed us back. And then Spread Eagle? They're a touring act, so they got ahead of us as well. And Bob's like, well, we'll put you on at 7. That's the prime spot, to tell you the truth. That's Saturday night. If you wait any longer, everybody's going to be shit-faced, and it's not going to be the same. And so I was like, fine, whatever. But, you know, there was a lot of people that were too young at the time when we were playing to get to see us. And so they showed up. They got to see us this time around. And so I was happy with the Reggie show. It was cool. It is what it is. You know, Reggie's just the metal bar. I had never played that bar. And I thought it was fun. It was a good time. And it was also good that we did Germany before we did Chicago. But it was nice. It was nice to come back and play a show in Chicago. But I will say, the scene is a bit different today than it was back in the 80s. Back in the 80s, it was a little more intense, felt a little more dangerous. Now it's a little more of a happy community, you know.
Well, it's funny because Spread Eagle is from my neck of the woods, Jeff, and to be honest, and this was no knock on them because their set was good. It was full of high energy, but the room cleared out when you guys were done, and maybe everybody needed a little break. It was tiring. They needed another beer, bathroom break, but it was definitely not the same energy in the room for Spread Eagle. So that should say something about it.
I didn't know that.
No, it was the case. And we're also pretty good friends with Ron Holzner. We had him and Carl on the show earlier in the year as well. So for me, this was a killer night because I got to see you guys, meet you. That was the first show with Mark Lopes fronting the mic at Metal Church. Yeah. So I think it was a pretty important night for metal. A lot of great things happened that night,
I was happy with it. Yeah, I was happy with it. Sometimes I get I've always been my harshest critic, even back in the day. I always felt, I'm not good enough, or we're not heavy enough, or we're not metal enough. I'm always criticizing shit out of everything I do. And now my beef is, I'm too old. I don't have the same energy I had, but I think I've got great musicians surrounding me, and I think my voice is still holding up all these years later. I didn't abuse it throughout the years. So I was happy with it. We gave a new generation a firsthand view of what the 80s metal scene was like. All those guys like E-Trope, Eric Wagner from Troubles, I knew those guys. I hung out with those guys. So we're like some of the torch bearers of that era,
Yeah.
So it was nice to be able to do that.
And I think I heard, I saw something that show was filmed for a future documentary.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, this thing, I did an interview for this. This is some film company in Chicago. These guys had done a film on the punk scene that got on Netflix. So they got this coming up, and they interviewed Eric Wagner like a month before he died. They interviewed Sean McAllister. They got myself. I'm not sure who else they got in there, but it should be an interesting documentary. It's cool that they're doing it. So
yeah, and it's great that you'll have archival footage from the Reggie show and hopefully be included in that. So
yeah, I also gave them. Somebody came up with some video from a show we did in 1983 with Thrash, so there's some of that on there as well.
Yeah.
Thrash, posers will die.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Jeff, shit. How was it received in Germany? The Keep It True festival.
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, it was in another afternoon show. We were the third band on, and that is a great festival. If you want to go to a metal festival, that is a fun time.
I mean, look at that room. It's awesome,
Yeah. And, people come in and come out, and most of them are camping outside and they're partying all day. And they come in and out of the venue as they see fit because you get a wristband walking in and out. And when we went in, that room filled up and people came in and it was packed. And that was my first show since the 80s.
Wow.
And suddenly I'm in front of like 5,000 people. And but it was phenomenal. I mean, everything was top notch. It was very pro festival when they put it together. And I really enjoyed it. I've never been on a stage like that.
Just speaking about your voice, had you been singing for the last 30 years in some way or form, or how did that go down? Just
on and off. And I never, once we broke up, I never performed with another band again. Yeah, I just had no interest. I didn't want to start all over again. So, but my voice is still holding up for some reason. It's not. I can't hit the pitches I used to when I was 21, but I can still carry it. And I think I'm a little more smarter when it comes to being a musician and writing music. And, I just look at it from a more mature approach.
Sure. So, well, Jeff, I think it's been a great hour chatting with you, man. We really got the lowdown on the history of the band from back then and up to the present. And I'm glad I was part of it and got to see you at Reggie's, and we make this connect and bring it on to our listeners. And it was a great conversation. And I only hope the best for the album and hope you guys do get out there and play some more shows and we could see you again and hopefully have you back again on the show. So, and before I go, I wanted to tell you, I chatted quite a bit at Reggie's with your brother. I sat next to him the whole night, and he was really adamant to make sure that I made a promise to him to get you on the show. So please say hello to him for me.
I will, Steve. Yeah. And I would like to bring this band outside Chicago. I would love to bring it to the tri-state area at some point. And not sure where we play, but I would love to play the East Coast and maybe bring it down to Florida and whatever.
We talked to Ron Holzner about maybe getting because he said they're going to book a gig. Hopefully, he said this year, maybe at the St. Vitus Bar in Brooklyn, which is kind of like a Reggie's, just on a smaller scale. Because he said that was Eric's home away from home in New York, and they wanted to bring the band. And I'm telling you, man, if I hear anything about it from Eric or you do, man, you got to jump on that bill, because that's the sweet spot for you.
Well, I tell you, we will play other shows if we're asked, if we're invited. No one's invited us. So, but if they asked us, I'm sure I could rally the other guys and do it. But yeah, I would love to play out in the New York area, New Jersey area. I think that'd be great, because I know we have fans out there.
Yep.
So.
Hey, Jeff, where can people get your product, find out about your band? Are you on Twitter?
We have a Facebook page, Witchslayer Metal. It's on Facebook. You can find it. Bandcamp is where you can find our album.
Okay. Sonic
Age Records, company out of Greece. We're selling the album on our Bandcamp page, but you can get it through Sonic Age, which is out of Greece. And that's pretty much it. Pretty low budget operation we got going on here. So,
well, we'll put all this up on the show notes and direct people through our channel. So, all right. Well, hey, Jeff, thanks for the talk. It was great going down heavy metal memory lane. You know, we're cut from the same cloth. And I just do have one question, though. I have a 24-year-old son that is a diehard Green Bay Packer fan.
That's too bad.
Yeah, he just wanted me to say, "Go Pack, go!" Okay.
No, there's always somebody, man. I could be anywhere else, see their goddamn Packer jerseys.
But we're up here in Bills country, and I'm a Miami Dolphin fan.
So am I.
So, but all kidding aside, thank you, and best of luck, my friend.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys, and it was great meeting you in Chicago when you were there.
Yeah, it's great, Jeff, and I think we'll talk again, and we'll see each other again for sure.
Right on. Thank you. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, you too, Jeff. Have a great weekend, buddy. Good. See you.
Metal for Life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.